Hello and welcome back to another episode of Top Tier Career. I'm the host, Chad Everett Broshears, and today I'm just going to talk. It's intended to be a shorter video. I know in the past I've done this, but anyway, or say the shorter video and it turns into 30 or 45 minutes, but whatever. To keep it really concise, is there's no richer place for ideas than the graveyard. No, meaning that there are so many ideas that never manifest into reality that they go to the grave of the person that conceives them. This is incredibly common. Um, so, what do we do about that since this is so incredibly common? One of the things that we do is move the microphone closer so there's no issues with hearing me. Now, all right. So we have all kinds of ideas. I've had great ideas throughout my life. My father, again, as I've spoken about it before, smartest man I've ever met, and I've spent time in and around academia, uh, and it's just the way he thought. Was incredibly mind blowing, and I also have access to this through retrospection, not just from the timelines that he was in my life, passed in 2006. So I've yet to find somebody or meet somebody who is actually more intelligent than my father. But that's not to say anything like, go around blowing the tooting horn for my father or whatever. It's just a fact that I've experienced in life. My father came up with many ideas, heat sensors for hubs on trailers that would communicate with the dash in the vehicle. 20 plus years later, they came out with it. 30 years later. Some vehicles actually do have that. It's pretty interesting and it's fast. It's the need, and a lot of us have these ingenious ideas that were born out of need, but we don't have the structure necessary to fulfill on that. So what happens is we go into it with this high level of excitement because we see a solution to a challenge, but we don't have enough structural support within ourselves, whether that's money, it's time, it's knowledge and implementation of knowledge into that field that would give us or grant us access into making progress. But what happens typically is that the idea fires you up, and then you make a few actions. Sometimes it's just write it down, or you just let it cycle around in your head like a little tornado for a while, of tornado of excitement and all of that. But you don't have the functional foundation necessary to birth this idea into the world where it becomes something shareable. Though there's stages to creating something. Making something shareable is one of the first stages after conception. Shareable just means that I can communicate it with you in a way that you can grasp what I'm trying to tell you about the idea, right? So I can give you something that would become substantive in your own mind, and therefore you can understand what I'm communicating with you. This actually is all ideas, but I'm looking more towards the business direction. And again, why there are so many ideas that go to the grave with people because they just don't have the capacity to create that idea into reality. Now, this episode is about how to create that capacity. Now, personal experience, I am as inquisitive as you guys see on these videos throughout my life. I am incredibly curious. As I'd mentioned in previous videos, as well as people that know me in person, I have not been bored since 2014 because of my curiosity, my inquisitiveness. I will ask questions and try to comprehend what I'm being exposed to, or filed from back in the back of my mind, I'll bring it forward and think, okay, well, at this stage of my life, how do I understand reality and how do I understand business practices if it be a business idea? So it prevents me from the non-action of a moment that creates boredom, which is typical of boredom. I excuse that because my mind has something else to work with. Nothing pleases my mind more than constant motion. I've meditated, but I use meditation, and I do use meditation as a centering, but yet it does still create traction. So I'm not bored at all in that process or that practice. So my father created multiple things, and I remember as a child uh, being just absolutely floored by what he was coming up with. Uh, uh, and it was something that I got by being attentive to my father's conversations with me and others that gave me access to something. So here's an idea. This is the to give you a little bit of history on me. My father had a pickup truck, and it was just this old red pickup truck with a wooden bed. It was modified after the bed rusted out, so my father made a wooden bed to it, and it's more of a flatbed type. Great, and then that's not the ingenious side of it. That's actually fairly common in the South or in rural areas to convert something into a wood frame, or not a wood frame, but a wood base whenever the metal may rust out. It's cheaper and more dependable over time if you get the right types of wood and things like that. At least that's some of the logic behind it. So we had this truck, and we're riding along, and it does have seatbelts. So I'm wearing a seatbelt, and I'm probably, I want to say 5, maybe 6. It's an early memory for me. And we're in town, and we're about to turn at a light, and I noticed that my father had his arm out the window, and he was using that to signal that we were turning as an older method for signaling, which some of my viewers will know that and some of them won't, just because it just depends on the generation they were born in, or the decade they were born in, really. So not to say they won't, it's more likely they won't know if they're younger, but more likely to know if they're older. It was a bigger practice back in the day. Still is in practice, though. It is still taught in driver safety, stuff like that. If turn signals aren't working, use this. So anyway, so we're sitting there, and I could hear him click the blinker. Oh, no, there was no blinker. The blinker wasn't working. Or no, he didn't use his hand for signaling. He did at times, but not this moment, actually, is recollection. He manually turned the blinker on, and then after we turned, he had to manually turn the blinker off. And I immediately said to my father, I'm like, Dad, wouldn't it be helpful if the blinker would turn off when you're driving, after it's used? Now, granted, there's a lot of adult logic that's not there because I was too young to actually grasp a lot of it. But my father looked back at me and looked to me and said that, because I was across from him, not behind him. He looked at me and said that that it does exist in vehicles. It's an invention that came along that helps prevent false signaling because people forget that their turn signals are on. You can see this when you're driving on the interstate, straightaways and stuff like that. You don't turn the wheel far enough to deactivate the blinker if you have the blinker in full action versus the soft touch now that we have where it's like a few seconds worth of the blinker and then it just stops itself. That was intended for lane change. It's a newer invention. It was not about that. That was not even in the world back then. That was not even close to being something. Because I'm talking about the early 80s here, mid 80s. So that was just to give you an idea. Another thing that my father would do, which I thought was absolutely just mind-blowing, is he would talk mathematical equations. He would not have it in front of him. He would ask me questions, and then we would discuss how to get to the answer. And he did this since before I can remember. I just recall some of my earliest memories recalling that I had been doing this. I just can't remember those moments. So there is a point in time where you do have, it's not an amnesia. The memory portions of the brain is not well developed enough to actually carry a lot of information over. Its priority and development is more towards motor recruitment and or functional needs that are exceeding memory's priority. So neurological conditioning, things like that, which not really beneficial for this conversation beyond just mentioning it. So I come from a family that has, well, my father predominantly, with a significant amount of ideas that never were birthed into reality. He would make prototypes, and he made quite a few prototypes, which is creating something into reality. But if you don't know how to market that prototype, if you don't know how to create the next steps necessary, whether that's the money in order to move it forward, or if it is, knowing the right person to get it in front of, if it is requiring a business structure, which in my opinion, pretty much all of it does. It just depends on what type of business structure. You could just put a business structure together that's just to sell the idea, but you have to have something there that's tangible enough and have the communication abilities to make it tangible enough to become something real to the other person and make them want to purchase it. So if you don't have the fundamental foundation, the good thing is that a lot of these ideas come to us when we're already doing something else to at least live, right? We're surviving, we're paying our bills, whatever it might be. We might even be making it above when we're thriving a bit. But then this thing comes to mind. Well, what's after that thing is, you have to have the strategies and structure necessary for that thing to become, more real to other people. So if you miss it, this is what I suggest anyone that's an earlier young entrepreneur do, which is a practice that I've used. You start looking at, okay, this is my goal. I want to create this thing, right? This widget. Well, I'll go with widget because it's tangible, although I've done this with systems. And I can give that after this. So the widget thing is this product, this thing that you can purchase. I know it will help your life. It is very effective. But now I have to go into manufacturing the widget. First comes prototype, at best that I can create one. You can do diagrams and things like that, or come up with a schematic of it that would help other people if you have that skill set. And you don't really need to have a complex skill set. If you can just get it out of your head onto paper so it's visual that you can explain, you can find somebody that can actually make the full-blown schematic. If you can afford to hire them or create an agreement with them that they would work with you in order to manifest this thing, then you can go that route. It's completely up to you. There's not one way to do anything. There's just the more effective ways to do things versus the ineffective ways of doing things, which is what I want and am working on, creating clarity in these videos to just get us to that point to better understand how to make something into reality and to get past our struggles. Because people don't have clarity, they don't know how much money it's going to take to actually run a certain idea into something that can start paying you back. It's an investment, really what it is. You take ideas, these ideas are investments of thought, right? Because it's resources across the board, and they'll be beneficial for clarity on this. Your thinking is a resource, your attention is a resource, your time is a resource, your money, your skills that you've acquired, your relationships are resources, your imagination, which does closer fall into the earlier examples. These things are all resources. It's not just money. So you can only allocate so much of your resources before it starts taking away something else, and it may shift your attention off work, and then you might start having tardy issues or ineffective behavior at work, where you just may not be completing the tasks necessary to stay employed there, and you start the path of discipline. There's all kinds of things that those resources actually affect. It could be taking you away from your family life or your partner, or that you need to do something for yourself to stay healthy. There's a lot of different things that if you don't stay well balanced, there's a cost to everything. It's just sometimes those costs are so minuscule it doesn't matter. It's not noticeable. And then other times it's incredibly detrimental. It could be the thing that you're on the line, you get fired for it. It could be the thing that now you just find out your partner has served you with divorce papers. Any of those areas, it's typical of neglect that comes from reallocating attention. So don't dismiss those areas of resources just simply because they're not necessarily quantifiable up until this moment, or you really haven't quantified them much until now. So when you understand the foundation to make progress, then you have to concern yourself with expectation of timeline and expectation of result. Because if you have an expectation of a timeline be in a month, but you don't have the fundamentals put together necessary to make 1 month a realistic timeline, then you are setting a false expectation. What is needed is to do a full checklist of what is necessary that you currently know is necessary in order to create this thing into the world. So you have to go through that process if you want to mitigate the potential of losing or derailing or abandoning the idea. So when you take that, that's a wiser way of doing it. So those things are necessary. Your resources are necessary. The relationships that you've created, obviously, as I mentioned, is also one of the resources. If you know how to lean into those relationships. Here's another problem that also beats people down commonly, is that they'll get the idea and then they'll share it with other people as best they can because they have the shareability of the idea as a resource capable to reach and to be able to offer off to others. The issue is that the more times you come up with these ideas that you're passionate about, you're fired up, or you're really excited about, other people might be enrolled to a degree, but they're not enrolled in the way of supporting you as much beyond just saying, hey, that sounds great, or whatever positive reinforcement. But you tell these people that are your relationship resources consistently every time one of these ideas come up, or often enough you have an idea that's shareable. You get them excited and enrolled, and then you dissipate, you pull back, or you just let it fall into the shadows. The really sad part about this is what it is it actually is in its own way kind of abusing the relationship, but without any intent. You're not intending to hurt the relationship, but their belief in you starts to diminish in the way that you are able to follow through. So they may say, okay, well, this person really can't follow through. The problem with that is that when you do have the idea and you have enough momentum to be able to make progress, these people are going to be more withdrawn and or more eager to not support you, or to just say, hey, you know what, yeah, it sounds good, go ahead, go have fun with it. But it's really just them looking at patterns that you've set in the past, and that you're likely going to facilitate the same pattern in the future because you haven't shown them that you've made enough changes for them to believe differently. So you really will help yourself by understanding this, because those relationships are incredibly necessary. I've done this very same thing many times because I do have a lot of ideas. I have a brain that is developed for problem solving, and not just the typical problem solving that most women complain about men and relationships over, but I mean like deep, systematically develop it. Uh, let me go back for a second, wipe that out. My mind is set up to create systems in order to create the solutions necessary. But if you can come up with a way of creating a solution, as an example here, you come up with a solution. That does not mean it's systematic. It doesn't mean that you can create a system with it that would move it into a positive direction on a regular basis. Systems are required to do that. Solutions are sometimes only temporary or individualized, and they don't actually lend themselves into other situations. So it could be a simplistic or a one-time solution, but it doesn't have a system around it in order to produce this continuous solution. And that continuous solution could be that you set the parameters of a way of thinking about something, and then when something else comes into the mix, it adapts to that new variable, and it can create another solution. It's not dogmatic in its approach, it's adaptive in its approach. That's what systems do when you create a proper system. When you create a one-time use system, is not a bad thing, but you need to be able to understand how to make adaptive systems. You can use this to overcome it now. Let's say this problem solving that I have at this moment, and the example is I've reached out to a friend of mine, and I fired them up, let's say 6 times in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years. But I fired them up enough that I emotionally remember that I did get them excited about it. Well, now that they say, okay, well, you know what, what's next? And I come up with a solution right now to re-enroll them into the next time, this very moment, that they're going to support me. Now, how they support me is, okay, well, they're going to have time dedicated to have a conversation that is specific about the idea. And they're going to make that very important, enough importance that they actually start to get your excitement out of it, more so than what they got before. Like, hey, good for you, I'm happy you're happy, or I'm glad you're excited, or whatever it might be. Now it has them see themselves involved in some way of being part of a solution that you're proposing through this idea. Now, that can be a one-time solution that will not extend itself again, because if you use that same pattern another time in the future, they know it's coming because they've felt it before, and it's how you got past their defenses that they've accomplished when dealing with your ideas, that they've accumulated their own method for kind of inoculating themselves, so they don't get over resource dependent on your idea, or overexcited or distracted, because your attention is a resource of like money, and it can only be spent in one place at a time. For every second that you spend in some place with attention is a debt, is a donation for the future of that thought or that attention span, whatever that attention is being held for. Go to college, you sit there, your attention is what is, you're not just paying financially, you're paying attention with cognitive capacity to process. And that's an investment for the future, because your goal is to come out with a degree that gives you a benefit and or an edge in the economy. So Same thing with this. You're asking your relationship to be a part of it, and you've accomplished that with this one-time solution. The future is, though, it won't work because it's very unlikely to work because they are familiar with and they know how to avoid that type of enrollment in the future because you have squandered the resource. You didn't do it intentionally. Nearly no one does it intentionally. Con people do, or con men do, but not people that are genuine and earnest in their efforts. So you have the individuals that are dealing with this. If you were to come up with a system type of approach to it, is you, and this particular example, what I do is I let people know, hey, I understand that I've gotten you involved and excited multiple times before. I have continued to develop and mature myself here. This is what I understand. And then you go through a foundation and a functional foundation breakdown to help them understand you are genuinely putting intention and effort behind you manifesting ideas into something that works in the economy. And that work in the economy could be a lot of things: making people's lives better, making more profit for them, making a new avenue for somebody to explore. There's a lot of different things the economy would appreciate and or demands of you in the American dream. It does demand it of you. You just may not realize it. So anyway, that's another conversation and another topic for another conversation. All right. So if you want to create a system, you come up with that foundation, you get the clarity, and then you inform them. These are the actions that I'm taking now to progress, and these are the future actions that I know that I need to take. These are the things that I know that I haven't taken, and these are this is the area of the things that I'm unfamiliar with and don't know anything about, but I can tell there's a void there, and I plan to explore into that void to figure out how to overcome the next thing. It's very challenging to do. It works off of, there's a piece of education out there that is, they give you a circle, and then in that circle they'll ask, how much of reality, how much of the totality of knowledge do you yourself know? And people will get answers like 5% of reality, or 5% of all knowledge, or 10% of all knowledge, something like that, if they're really being honest. Then there is okay, so this is what you know. Then there's another piece of the pie, that is the pie graph here, that is going to be you don't know this. And it could be whatever percentage that is there, right? And if you're truly honest and you really think about this, it's not going to be the remainder of the pie. Let's say it's 5% that you know and then 95% you don't know. That's not how it works. It's what you don't know. Then you get into the void. And the void is what you don't know. It's just a void of your ability to process information because you haven't had the experiences, things like that. So when I talk about that, that's what I mean when I'm saying that there's you know what you know what you don't know, and then there's the void. Void's not a bad thing. A lot of times it's used in that way. All it is just it's a vacancy of information. You don't even have enough to know what you know or what you don't know. So it's beyond all of that. So as far as that's concerned, that is a better way of looking at a lot of this, is because it gives you insight into what's next. So I teach people that as well when I'm creating a system around for progress. I let them know how this works. This is how it works with me. This is what I would like to accomplish out of this. And this is how you could play a role in it if you decide to play a role in it. Moving forward, we can take that route. But be aware that you're now creating an expectation in their world, not just your own. You're asking something from them, but they in return are wanting something from you. That could be the companionship of the idea. It could be the money that comes out of it. It could be access to resources that you accumulate, maybe other relationships, or maybe you'll give them time for something, or support them in their endeavors in the future, or graph off of you through your inspiration into their own imagination. So a lot of things there whenever it comes to creating a system. But I want to try to create this as simplistic as possible. If this doesn't come across simplistic, I apologize. It is the way that my mind works and seems fairly simplistic to me. But this is how the process works if you want to overcome that and create a system and enrolling people. So the beautiful thing about it is, you've done well whenever that system not only enrolls the person you're talking to, but then they go off and they enroll someone or several people into what you're doing. You're creating a resource sharing pot at that point, and this can take it from an idea in your head, keep it away from the graveyard, put it into the economy, because that's the goal. Get it into the economy, because the economy is where you get rewarded for your efforts. You get acknowledgement, you get money, you get growth, you get all kinds of desirable and positive things. You get hardships, you get lessons, all of which actually, if you take the thinking process that I'm intending to give you with this, and that my goal is to give you with this, is that you look at hardship as a desirable situation. You look at the lessons. You don't take hardship and say, I failed. You don't take hardship and say it slowed me down. You don't take hardship and do anything that would have a negative connotation to the emotional recall of it. You put it into, what do I not know here and how can I overcome this? What do I need to know in order to overcome overall? And how to use what you're learning right now in other aspects of your life or in other situations, because you've made that adaptive versus dogmatic. I will teach another way of looking at it, and this is just coming to me as a way of expressing it, is there's a difference. There's micromanagement and macro management. Macro management is not bad, and it's framed as being bad by a lot of consultants and or business support companies that are out there. It's not bad, actually. Macro is what you do when you first get somebody, a new employee, or you bring somebody into something they're completely unfamiliar with. Macro management is when you manage everything about the person's day. Other than their breaks or lunches, that would be highly aggressive macro management to manage those areas. And to me, that's an infringement on anything related to that person, that relationship, if you would go that far. But you will have people that think that's beneficial. I personally don't, unless they're asking me something about using their breaks or lunches, however, to use that for the most efficient outcome for them. That's fine if it's asked, but not unsolicited. I would not give that advice that they don't ask for their time off when they're away or break or whatever. So macro is how you can you teach people the ins and outs. With what I do as a consultant is I do macro to micro management. Macro for the very beginning and then micro overall, because when you get to the micro is where you're dealing with the little aspects, but you're giving them so much more autonomy to do the day-to-day stuff that they need to do. But all you're doing is observing to make sure that it's done right without interference necessarily, or with very minimal interference. Macro is maximal interference, because you're constantly interjecting to help get the person on the right track, again, like you would do a new employee. Micro is what you do with somebody like me, which is I've created this thing for you. All you're doing is witnessing that I'm continuing to do what I told you I would do. That's it. Micromanagement. You give me full autonomy to do what's necessary in order to achieve the goals that we've agreed on, but you let me do it the way that I do it, and you don't interject. Somebody like me, for the majority of what I do in the business world and in my personal life as well, it's in my total life, is I am very good at being micromanaged, but it actually will turn me off and create animosity between us if you try to macro manage me. I am not someone to be macro managed unless I am in an area that is a new thing to me that I have no or little information on. But then I am an amazing student. I'm like, teach me. I don't know much here. Please help me understand it. Take me from macro to micro. I want micro, but I am more than happy for you to macro manage me right now. That's the difference between those two when you go macro to micro. You also have that in your regular relationships. So keep that in mind. You have macro to micro. If the person is well equipped to doing the thing that you are requesting of them, do not macro manage them. You micro, and you can learn from them by just observing. Just like, hey, I just want to see this. Show me. Most people love a student, and become a student. Micromanagers are actually more students and or really good teachers, because they want you to learn your lessons. So that'd be the micro versions. All right. So if you want to get these ideas out, get the foundation necessary. Money's not always the issue. Money can buy you a lot of things, but there are things that money can't. Relationships have to. Excuse me. The other pieces would be, what are you innately capable of? And how do you manage what you're innately capable of? You have to have clarity on these things too. Now, not necessarily like perfect clarity, just to be aware that it's there. And how do you manage yourself whenever something like that happens? Latent skill sets can be chaotic, because when they come to the surface, it's like realizing that you have 4 more cylinders to your engine, and you kind of forget that there's a speed limit and other people on the road, and you just give it to it to find out what the vehicle is capable of. And it can really accelerate you so far that you've actually become more reckless, and that recklessness affects other relationships. It, just like on the road, you put people in danger. Well, you're putting in danger what you've enrolled people into. That is a pretty big subject that I'm not going to cover necessarily on this video, but to mention it, because that's one of the issues that we have with latent skill sets. So, all right, I'm going to summarize, and then we'll go ahead and just finalize the video here. But to keep your ideas out of the graveyard is you have to give them traction. In order to give them traction is to understand exactly what's necessary to take the next steps, but you also need to understand the big scope of what is the next step. Every time you find that you're short on something, you don't know something, or you don't quite have the right information or enough information, look for it. Now, again, this is why I don't have boredom. I have had zero, not a second worth of boredom since 2014. It was roughly, I want to say it was June of 14. Might have been, no, it was cold. So it was likely February of 14. I hadn't had it since then. So it's, if you think this way, you will find yourself not dealing with as much boredom and downtime or frustration. You'll find yourself curious and looking for answers. That is one of the best places to be, the inquisitive mind. Don't give a man a fish, teach them to fish. Now, that approach to things. So that is what I want you to take from this video as well, is take out a piece of paper, write down everything you know about whatever idea you have, and get the good stuff out of the way too. Get the exciting stuff out of the way. This is going to help X amount of people, and how does it help those people, and by what way do they get this involved in their life? Is it a tangible or non-tangible option? Is it a service that you're providing? Whatever it might be, but understand how the end user is going to experience your product, whatever that product is. Again, product does not need to be tangible. It's a product of outcome. So it could be a service, it could be an idea that you're hoping people comprehend things. By the way, free is horrible. Free will kill ideas. But you have to understand how to strategize and when to utilize concepts of free, but without having it become a hindrance. That's in a sales world too, and that's for another conversation, but you have to have those things as well. What I suggest is that you break things down into sales, service, and science, understand how sales, service, and science works with each one of your ideas, and how they would work in the real world. Manufacturing, there's a lot of stuff to learn here. I could right now contact a supplement company and manufacture my very own supplement. It would be labeled with the label that I want on it. It would have all the macro, micronutrients, the entire nutrition requirement. All of that would be on it, and it would be a product that you could purchase. I could do that, and I don't need to be a large company. I don't need to be like the GNCs or the Vitamin Worlds or any of them. I could do this completely separate from all of them, because companies will do that. They will sell you the product and they'll label it for you, and then it's your product at that point. Same thing with manufacturing other things like exercise equipment. There are companies, there are large companies out there that they will manufacture whatever you want and put your label on it and then send it to you. So these things exist. Most people are unaware of that, or they just haven't put the point of thinking, which still makes it unaware, but they don't know because they're lacking experience in it. Now, I know this because when I worked at a vitamin store, supplement and vitamin store, oh man, 2004, I want to say, I managed one, and I learned about the manufacturers for supplements then. The label that for the company that I worked for was, they taught us this product is made in the same place that they make these other big brand ones, so these other very popular brands, same place, and we can make the same thing, minus they had to have it just enough different that it would not infringe on copyright and the patent, if you will, if there's patents or whatever. So you couldn't infringe on it. There was a percentage difference that you'd need to have. It could be they just added more vitamin C, which is not really one of them. They would add more like L-arginine or something like that to make it just a different mix, enough of a different mix that it would actually miss the copyright infringements and creeping up on somebody's patent. So I learned that then. Manufacturing, I learned that through while I was actually consulting. It was an easy thing. It was just a blind spot for me because I didn't think about it. It wasn't an area for me to think about as far as manufacturing equipment. Like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. When they do it with supplements, they do it with other things. Why wouldn't they do that with equipment? So they're not dedicated. Like Hammer Strength is one of the pieces of, is a company that manufactures, or at least has equipment manufactured for them. So it's not like you see like a Hammer Strength factory that manufactures it. They typically, those kinds of companies will send this off to these large factories and manufacture it, slap their labels on it. They manufacture to their specs, so they have to send over the specs they want. Again, these are the things that I've learned because I don't find boredom. I can't. I don't want boredom. And I keep myself occupied enough that I can't be bored. So, all right. Let's see. Continue to summarize. Keep your ideas out of the graveyard by putting something under it. Write all the stuff out that you know that you know. Write the things that you know that you don't know, and that'll give you some of the work to do. Because the other part of it, as you get into the areas that you don't, or that you don't know, and even sometimes in the areas of what you know, you will start to understand there's more in the void, and you start pulling some of that information out of that abyss, and then you make it more into the bracketed position. Typically it goes from I know I don't know. That is almost always the case. I know I don't know this, but before you didn't even realize it because it wasn't on your radar. It was in the void. So you pull a little bit over, and once it gets into that I know I don't know, you can now put practice into becoming something that you know. But you have to have a transition piece to it, and that's how you can better transition things. Every time you take something out of the what you don't know, it opens more opportunities for the things you don't know. So, all right, foundation is what's necessary to get something out of your head and into reality. Foundation is through your resource abilities and capacities, all of your totality of resources. That's where you go into, out of your head into the real world. Practice. Don't be afraid of failing. Failing just means you don't know enough, or you're lacking experience in something, and you continue taking those moments of failures and make them into exercises for success. You will become successful. You just have to be one, patient, you have to be adaptive, and you have to want to move forward. Just take on enough that you don't kill your idea. Don't take on so little that the idea doesn't gain traction and then it just becomes forgotten. And don't take on so much that you're overwhelmed and you'd rather the idea die than to have to continue to deal with being overwhelmed. So that's my goal in this video, is to get you to at least see differences in those realities and how do you create something into the world. So don't let your ideas go to the graveyard with you. Humanity needs your ideas. We all do. This is a benefit of having as many people on the planet as we have, is we can come up with all kinds of ingenious approaches to things. We have a guy right now that has taken space travel away from the government by creating a privatized direction with it. And now the government is using his technologies to better their systems. So, and I am talking about Elon Musk here. Obviously, Jeff Bezos has his own, but let's just say he's an imitation of Elon. He's not the originator. In my world, and my experience, and my knowledge base is that Elon is the originator, not a copy. So that's also why SpaceX is so much more successful than, hell, I don't even know the name of Jeff Bezos's company. I forgot it because it's not regularly in your face. It's just whatever. So it's always possible. So much is. We just need to continue to build towards that. We all work together. It's ants or crabs in a bucket. I'm an ant in a bucket. I want to help you get out of it. And the same as your help getting out of it is also me getting out of it. Crabs in a bucket will pull each other down. And sure enough, by the end of the day, nearly every crab that was in the bucket when you walked away will still be there. But when you go back with the ants in a bucket, by the end of the day, none of them will be there. They'll all be gone, unless there's a dead one that's left in there or something. But that's it. It's crabs or ants. And I'll make that reference in future videos as well, because I use this regularly in my life. It's crabs or ants, man. Which are you? I'm an ant. I'm not more special than anybody else. I'm just developed in certain areas, and this is what I'm sharing. There's plenty of areas that I would like to improve on, and there's areas that I don't know I can improve on, and I'm trying to get that into the category of I know I don't know. But it just takes time and introspection. But that all adds to making something real. Making something real in my life in a lot of avenues. But the goal is to make it real in the business sector, in the economy. Better my life, better others' lives. That's all I have for you on this video. Again, this is Top Tier Career. I am your host, Chad Everett Broshears. And I hope you take something from this. Do share this video with those in your life that you know can benefit from it. Subscribe to this. And in the future, there will be some freebies that I give away through email lists and things. And then there'll be courses that I'll offer as well. But let's not focus on that so much as we just focus on what's next. And what's next will be some of the freebie stuff, just some things to help you get started or to help add to what you're already started working on, but on the fundamental and foundational level, creating more of a solid place to work from. So until next time, keep thinking, keep practicing. We're all in this together, and I want you to have the American dream the same as I want and need the American dream. This is my fight to keep the American dream alive. We have a lot of people coming up in this country now that do not even for the slightest bit understand how businesses work. And you can hear that because they use language like eat the rich. And if you're successful, you must have screwed somebody over. This nonsensical belief system that unfortunately universities are teaching children. This is my way of trying to dispel the nonsense and to help people understand it's not about other people's advantages. It's about how do you create your own advantages through developing yourself. That's it. Wheel of Opportunities, man. It's the Wheel of Fortune, not the game show, but or the board game. It will come around. It's how developed are you to take action when the opportunity arises. So it's on you. All right, until next time, let's all work on that American dream. Subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, like this video, comment if you're a business owner and you'd like to actually be on this and be one of the people that are in my first interviews, by all means, do please. Or just to be an interview, whether you watch this now or if you watch this, months or years later, just put a comment in the comment section. I'll create more calls to action in time, like what email to send things to, stuff like that. And then we can go from there. All right. But let's all fight for that American dream. Until next time, we'll see you guys. Bye-bye.